Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this week here on the Armed with Reason podcast, brought to you by GVpedia. Last week, when Devin and I were on, we mentioned that we had some great guests lined up to join us, and we're grateful to be able to bring you one of those guests today. So, here with us, we have Andy Pelosi, who is the founder of the Campaign to Keep Guns Off Campus, and he is here to speak with us about his organization and the landscape of access to firearms across college campuses in this country. Welcome, Andy. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much, Caitlin and Devin. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on today and talk to you guys.
So, this topic is specifically of interest to me because for over a decade, I worked in higher education, thankfully, in a state with very strong gun laws. And I have to say, I never really thought about guns on campus because I knew they just weren't allowed, right? It was a part of the student conduct and the student handbook, and it was clear, right? There was no gray area. It was very black and white. Um, and so in doing a little more research into your organization, I started to think about how I might have felt living on college campuses or working on college campuses, knowing that there was legislation that supported having guns present on campus. And it definitely would have changed the feeling of security or lack thereof, I guess, if there were guns. So I really appreciate the work that you do. And if you can, to start today, if you can just let us know what motivated you to kick off the campaign to keep guns off campus.
Right. No, again, thanks. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this issue because it's a niche issue, no doubt. I mean, it's something that not a lot of folks know about, or people are learning about it. But just briefly, I've been a gun control advocate for almost 27 years now. I started out running a state organization, New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. I was the first executive director there for several years. I left the movement briefly, came back, and said I want to start my own entity. And a colleague of mine, John Johnson, who ran in the old state organization called Iowans for the Prevention of Gun Violence, he and I teamed up and co-founded the Campaign to Keep Guns Off Campus right after the Northern Illinois University shooting, which happened on February 14th, 2008. So what really motivated us, I think, was we were concerned, and I know that Devin and Caitlin, you probably know too about this, but I know Devin's done a lot of work on this. We were concerned of what happened in the 90s with concealed carry, how the gun lobby went across the country and really changed state laws from states being may issue states, they may issue a permit to carry a concealed weapon to shall. And we thought that after the Northern Illinois University shooting and the prior one, obviously, which is extremely well known, unfortunately, the Virginia Tech shooting in 2007, that the gun lobby would start to say, okay, the response to these shootings needs to be arming faculty and arming students and others on campus because they'll be the ones that can protect campuses from incidents. And so what we thought we would do is, and this is really a state issue, this is not a federal issue. So every state, every state has the opportunity to, put forth laws that would either prohibit guns on college campuses or let the schools decide or allow them or force the colleges that, to permit concealed carry on campus. We were concerned that, laws would be changed. And unfortunately, we were right. And there was this movement, because there was just one state, Utah, in 2004, after a protracted battle, that said, okay, the state system had to allow concealed weapons on campus, and it was very, very broad. Guns could be carried just about everywhere, including in daycare centers and places like that. So what we did, two guys, they didn't know who we were. We wrote to every public college in the United States, 2 years and the 4 years, and we sent them letters. And we told them about the issue. We were concerned. We had a brief resolution. We asked them to sign it and join us in opposition to allowing guns on college campuses. So we did that for, I don't know, I guess over a year. And we ended up getting about 10% of the colleges to sign up and join our coalition. And I think we had schools in 43 states, 43 or 44 states that joined. And, we would get, sometimes we would get a response that said, we support you, but, we already, prohibit guns on campus. So, we don't think we need to sign something like this. Anyway, we did that. That was really kind of a stepping off point. We did not have a plan. We did not have a business model. We did not know. We were two gun control advocates that had a lot of, we were policy guys. We knew how to fight guns. We knew how to fight the gun issue, all aspects of the gun issue. John and I and others had worked on trying to reauthorize the assault weapons ban back in 2004. And that was that was a project signing up police chiefs, over 2,000 police chiefs. So we kind of modeled this along those lines. But then we got involved in states. We worked in Missouri in 2009. We helped stop guns on campus there. We then connected with student advocates in Texas at UT Austin in 2009, helped them. They did the heavy lifting, but we helped them stop guns on campus in Texas for several years until, unfortunately, in 2013 and then 15, the legislature signed legislation allowing guns on campus. But we started working across the country. And really our view was kind of as grassroots folks, we're coming in to help you. We will connect with the stakeholders, whether they be students or faculty or other, parents or others. This is what we know. Here are the resources that we know are available. We'll help you as much as we can. And again, we've worked, over the years now, we've worked in, I would say 27 states fighting guns on campus. A lot of successes, definitely some defeats. Texas and then Georgia, most notably. But this issue generally comes up in the red states for the most part. Those states that have the trifecta legislature, Republican controlled, and the governor is also a Republican. That said, we saw some victories, notably in Michigan in 2012, where the governor, Schneider, who was a Republican, vetoed guns on campus. We saw in Arizona in 2011, Governor Brewer, she vetoed guns on campus. And in 2016, Republican Governor Nathan Deal, he vetoed guns on campus. Of course, the next year, unfortunately, he signed a similar bill. So all to say is you can win in these states, but when we do see these bills being signed, they're signed by in red states. And the most notable one last year was, and I think we may want to talk a little bit about last year's session, was in West Virginia, where guns on campus became law, and it'll take effect later this year. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I appreciate on your webpage, you have a really great timeline of not only just the background of your organization, but the states that you've been working in. And you started to touch on it already, but would you let us know a little bit about last legislative session? You brought up West Virginia, but talk about some of the fights that you took on. And looking forward into the future, what are some of your priorities moving into next legislative session?
Sure. It was a somewhat busy legislative season in 2023. There were bills introduced in states like Tennessee, Kentucky, Iowa. There was obviously there was a bill in West Virginia. There was a bill in Wyoming. There was a bill in Idaho. Idaho already allows guns on campus, but it's it's strict in terms of where guns can be carried. For example, you can't have them in a location that has more than 1,000 people, and some other restrictions. But they wanted to do away with some of those restrictions. Unfortunately, that bill did not pass. There was also a bill in Arizona, and again, Governor Hobbs vetoed that legislation. We had helped stop that legislation in the prior year. So Arizona was another state. So you can see, I mean, there are bills in in the far west, bills in the Midwest, and in those places. The Tennessee bill, of course, was part of that whole unfortunate and tragic incident, after the Covenant school shooting. And there was a movement, to try to pass different types of strong gun legislation, which ultimately failed. But a spotlight was put, I think, on Tennessee. One of those bills was to expand who could carry on a Tennessee campus. Right now, on a Tennessee campus, only faculty can carry a firearm, and they have to register with campus law enforcement, which is unique. No other state does that, where guns on campuses is allowed. Uh, but in West Virginia, we were fighting a huge uphill battle. There were, in both legislatures, there was more than a supermajority of Republicans. I believe there were only 12 Democrats between both houses in the West Virginia legislature, and you have a Republican governor, Jim Justice, and we had worked with advocates in 2019 uh, to stop guns on campus, and it was a true grassroots movement. All the colleges and universities were in opposition. The students were strong. The faculty were strong. It was hard to organize this time in 2023, and again, we just didn't have a chance. So that, unfortunately, that bill became law, and it will take effect later this year. So again, a number of victories last year, but we hate to see any state change their laws and force the colleges to allow them on campus. Looking to this year and ahead, right now there are bills in Iowa. It's the same bill from last year. This bill is it does different things. It allows guns on school buses, K through 12 schools, believe it or not. And it will allows guns in parking lots on K through 12 campuses. It also allows guns to be stored in locked vehicles on public college campuses. We call that kind of a parking lot state. There's a number of states across the country, at least 10, depending on how you count them, that in Florida is an example where you can have your firearm locked in a car on a college campus. Parking lots are really difficult places to defend, especially if you're an employer. So, this is an issue that we pay close attention to. And Iowa bill is back. It's already passed in the House. There is a bill in Kentucky again, in both houses, that would force guns on campus. And in Florida, also known as the gunshine state, unfortunately, there is legislation that would allow open carry on a college campus. It also will allow open carry at polling places, and also weaken extreme risk protection orders. So that bill is from what the legislators or the leaders in the legislature are saying in the House and the Senate, that the bill is dead on arrival. We hope that's true, but we're not going to take them at their word. We'll continue to organize an opposition, because that bill would be extremely dangerous to public safety. I expect that there'll be other bills in other states. It's still early in the legislative season. We've done work in Oklahoma, for example, good connections with schools there, and touching base with them to make sure, again, that's a parking lot state, but we're hoping that that's all it remains a parking lot state. But I expect, Caitlin, to see other states introduce guns on campus bills, as we move forward. And what we're trying to do is just continue to build networks of stakeholders, faculty and students, connect with them, provide resources to help them fight when these bills do come up.
I'm not sure if what I'm about to interject with here is a question or a thought, or maybe a combination of both, but I'm thinking about you saying open carry on a college campus, and working. So I was in college in 2007 during Virginia Tech. And while Columbine had occurred and we knew other mass shootings had occurred, that was really the first time that I remember a large group of students thinking, like, oh my gosh, this could happen to us here. And it wasn't long after that those of us who worked in residence life, so responsible for housing the students on campus, focused with public safety on active shooter drills. Some relatively basic drills, a quick video that you would watch.
Right.
Others really intense training, including like actually acting some scenarios out, which is traumatizing, but that's for another podcast one day. Um, but part of the learning that happened was like what to keep an eye out for, right? So if you
Right.
see a student walking across the quad with a gun, right, that's something that you should call campus police and say, hey, I see this kid walking across campus. So my brain, I think, is trying to sort of re refile what my reaction would have been if that was in a state where that's allowed, right? It wouldn't have been something you'd call campus police over because it would have been permissible.
Right. Right. Uh, the Virginia Tech review panel, which came together after the Virginia Tech shooting in 2007, they put forth a number of recommendations, and none of those recommendations included arming faculty and students. Just kind of to speak to what you were talking about, really recognizing signs, if someone was in trouble, if you were to see something on campus, to report it right away to campus law enforcement, putting resources into for counseling and those types of services. Nothing is 100%, but they definitely were very strong. And this was law enforcement also on this. There were a number of different people that were part of this commission. It was not about adding more guns. And some of the reasons why, which I'm sorry I didn't talk about this before, but just quickly if I could, some of the reasons why we don't want to have firearms on campus. And I went to I was at a FedEx, and I was getting having copies made for some type of presentation, and the guy goes to me, he goes, I didn't even know this was a thing, because he saw, campaign to keep guns off campus. Like, yeah, you would think that it shouldn't be a thing. But our concerns are really, the risk factors, for students, especially. I mean, they are, they're away from home maybe for the first time, many of them. They are exposed to drugs and alcohol, other stressors. When you're introducing firearms into that environment, the risks are just are multiplied. And having the firearm present, as we know, if it's used, it's going to be 95%, at least, data showing successful in terms of someone, dying by gun suicide. Do we really want to have that? There's instances, of course, women dying in domestic violence incidents with firearms are involved. We're increasing those risks there. We're increasing risk for accidental or unintentional shootings to occur. There's really no, in many states where guns on campus has become law, or at least in several states, I should say, I'll restate that, in several states, there isn't really good information and protocols put in place for storage of weapons, like especially if they're kept in a residence hall. So there's a whole host of issues. And also, again, going back to those parking lot states, guns stored, in locked cars. There's good data out there by a couple of different gun control organizations that show how many guns are actually stolen. I believe the last data I saw was in 2020, where over 300,000 guns were recovered, stolen from vehicles and traced. So, that's another big issue. So this is not something that college presidents are going to their respective legislatures and governors and say, hey, listen, you know what? We can't defend our campus. We need to have our students and our faculty carrying firearms. That just doesn't happen. This is really a coordinated effort by the gun lobby that's been going on for a number of years to push guns into as many public places as they possibly can. And we're going to continue to fight that in every state for as long as we possibly can.
Yeah, to kind of jump on that, like I'm kind of curious how over the decades that you've been doing this work, like even before the campaign to keep guns off campus, how have you seen the landscape change around this particular issue? Because I mean, way back when it just wasn't a thing one would even think of. And now I know, and you had mentioned Oklahoma, there's almost always like a perennial bill that tends to be dead on arrival, but one day it will probably rise to the top of getting guns on campus. actually kind of surprising given the craziness of Oklahoma. We have permitless carry in basically any other bad gun law that you can imagine. We're one of the only states with an anti-extreme risk protection order
Right.
law, which it's like, let's do the exact opposite of what public health would suggest. But even in Oklahoma, it's like kind of a step too far, but it's seems to be changing.
No, I don't know I can theorize why, and so I'll do my best on that front. When I was working at New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, I was there from 1999 to 2005. Uh, I remember hearing about Utah and the schools fighting guns on campus, and this was probably around 2002 or so. And I'll be quite honest, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to it. I mean, I was, involved in other things, gun-related things, and I didn't really think it was an issue. And I was, kind of surprised, like, well, it's probably just be a one-off thing. Okay, it'll be Utah, and that'll be that. But I think again, after the Virginia Tech shooting, I really believe, the National Rifle Association, again, Gun Owners of America and Second Amendment Foundation, those other groups, they weren't as strong back then. I think that the NRA they didn't put this front and center on their websites back then, but they were behind it. And the front group really was Students for Concealed Carry on Campus. They were the ones that were leading the charge. But I'm pretty sure that they had support from their friends at the NRA, formidable advocates, no doubt, Students for Concealed Carry on Campus. I think that again, there was opportunities that were seen by the gun lobby to say, okay, let's stoke fear, let's take advantage of what's happened at these campuses with these shootings, and try to convince legislators that, and this is not unlike, and it's really kind of connected also to ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange, is a commission or committee. I'm not sure exactly what ALEC stands for. I should know the last C, but ALEC has a history of pushing more kind of right-wing type of legislation in different areas. One of those areas was guns on campus. They had a model bill, and that bill would get passed around to different. You'd see it. The language was very similar in state to state to state, and I think that there was fertile ground in states like Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Arizona, Missouri, to name a few, where these bills were said, let's put these bills forward. We've got Republican control of both houses and the governor's office, and that's what they started to do. And there was success in several of those states, but there were defeats too. But I think again, it was seized upon as an opportunity, I think, not unlike what happened with concealed carry in the 90s. That's okay. This is something that we can push, and it's because of federalism. It's a state issue. It's not, the federal government had nothing to do with this.
So to kind of go slightly to the philosophical here, in terms of myths, like one of the biggest myths that GVpedia tries to counter is the whole idea that guns keep us safer. And I'm sure you've seen this myth pop up in the guns on campus debate, where the pro-gun side's like, well, this is the reason why we need more guns, is the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun sort of situation. And so I'm curious how you've seen that entire mythos play out in the debate, and then kind of what the data actually shows when guns are allowed on campus.
Right. No, good question. It's one of the things we've looked at over the years, and there's a colleague of ours, a colleague of many, Dr. Stephen Boss in Arkansas. You guys may know Steve. Steve has, I met Steve, I don't know, about 11 years ago. Worked closely trying to help stop guns on campus in Arkansas. But one of the things that I'd asked Steve to take a look at, and Steve's written a book on, on homicide on campus and off campus. and is what kind of crimes are actually happening on campuses compared to what's happening off campus. And our point was that, if we're looking at states where guns are not allowed on campus, we are seeing very low crime rates. All right, and we're comparing that to what's happening off campus. So the Clery data, which may not be perfect, but what it's the data that we have, shows that for the most part, campuses are pretty safe environments. Does crime occur? Do rapes occur? Sexual assault, larceny, other things? They definitely do, and maybe some things are underreported, but it is happening on a much lower rate than the off-campus counterparts where guns are permitted. So that's something we like to talk about. There are some legislators that find that persuasive, and others, that will dismiss it. But we think it's an important, piece of data. And again, we would also argue that you're safer for the most part on a campus than you are off campus. And part of that reason is because in places where their guns are not present, that's why.
Do you believe that is the main motivating factor for having guns on campus? Is the whole guns keep us safer myth? Is it more political than that? I'm sure it's a very complicated question, right? You could probably spend quite a bit of time breaking that down, but at the heart of it, do you think that's the motivation?
I mean, I don't want to be entirely cynical here, so I will say that there are definitely some people that in their heart of hearts believe, yes, I mean, I'm a parent of, I have a daughter who is a junior at a public college in Virginia, and I have another daughter that's going away to school, next, in 6 months. So, it's something that, I'm continually concerned about. So I would say there are definitely people that believe, I think with every fiber, that this is the only way that, people can be safe. That said, I think there's a much larger majority that look at this as a political issue. Again, as I mentioned before, the gun lobby orchestrating, trying to change state laws across the country under the kind of the guise of the Second Amendment. And so far there hasn't been any type of cases that have said that you have that right to carry on campus. Obviously, we're gonna see, we'll continue to see lawsuits challenging that. But what we've seen so far, and the history has pointed out actually that schools have, going back into the 1800s in different states, southern states too, by the way, have prohibited firearms on their campuses, whether it be Georgia or Virginia or some of the Midwestern states. But I think Caitlin, I think it's really still largely politically driven. Again, just like you're seeing, the evisceration of permitless carry, or requirements to have a permit to carry a concealed weapon, and getting rid of waiting periods in some places, things like that. I think it's just, again, an absolutist position that people should be able to carry wherever they want.
I was afraid you were going to say that, but I figured I'd ask.
Just my opinion.
No, and I would have to agree. So, Andy, what can our listeners do to help your cause, to help keep guns off campus?
A great question. I think that we have a few things. We have a sister website called armedcampuses.org, ARMED campuses.org, and it's a 50-state treatment of what the campus gun laws are in each state. So one thing, I think, if you're a parent and you've got a parent or guardian, you have someone going to school soon, take a look. If you're concerned about firearms, take a look at that website and see kind of what are the laws in different states. And again, this really deals with public colleges and universities. Except for Wisconsin, private schools can protect their campuses in terms of they're not going to be impacted by laws that are changed. Wisconsin's the only state, unfortunately, that private schools have to allow firearms to be carried in certain places on campus. So one is, avail yourselves of the knowledge that's out there. Other gun control groups also, kind of touch on this issue too. So I would say just, educate yourself about that. That's one thing. If you care about this issue, you don't want guns on college campuses, join us, join another organization that, that fights this issue and other issues. I think it's really important because to educate yourself of what's happening, because it's not only college campuses, it's, K through 12, public K through 12 schools. I mean, this is a push, to arm teachers and other non-law enforcement personnel in K through 12 schools, which is, not unlike what's happening, with the college campus issue. And that train has left the station, in my mind, unfortunately. And we're seeing more guns in these educational environments. And, we look at educational environments as kind of places, they're places for learning and scholarship. We don't want to have firearms introduced, in those areas. We understand that there are issues happening at schools, but we also believe there's other steps that can be taken to protect schools that don't add firearms into the equation.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to go into this topic. I know you said before at the beginning, this is very niche, but it's really important because we think of our educational institutions as these places that we have send our students off to, and generally places that they are safe. And unfortunately, sometimes we learn that that's not necessarily the case when tragedy strikes, but it's also really important to be informed as to what the campus policies and the laws look like when it comes to having guns on campus. Like I said before, it's really not something that I ever thought about because I knew guns weren't allowed. And so I knew if there was a gun that showed up anywhere, it wasn't allowed to be there. And there was something I could do about that. And this certainly creates a lot more difficulties in those scenarios and keeping students and faculty safe when that's not the case. So, Devin, any final thoughts or questions that you have?
Just in basically broad agreement that the guns on campus is kind of a flashpoint or microcosm of kind of what we've seen elsewhere with like permitless carry and stuff, and it's sadly extending to places of higher learning and will make people less safe. And fortunately, it's seen as such an extreme issue that even places like Oklahoma haven't quite picked it up yet. But I kind of reading the tea leaves myself, I sadly think that there's going to be even more states going forward trying for it. So if my prognosis is correct, your work's going to get even harder over the coming years.
Yes, I think you're right, Devin. And but it's again, all we can do is again try to educate as many folks as possible that this is happening out there. There's great kind of stakeholders in place, faculty especially, that are for the most part opposed. Students obviously are more transitory, but when they're there, a lot of them are fighting against this. Some of them want it, of course. I'm not going to say that there aren't any students that want it. There are some, but there are large groups that oppose it. So we're going to keep fighting. We're optimistic because you have to be optimistic when you work on the gun issue. I think you guys know that. Otherwise, why bother? But there's we'll keep fighting, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come on today and talk with both of you, about this issue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, keep up the great work, and we'll check in with you later and see how some of these bills are unfolding.
Sounds good.